Let's see. There we go. My my audio interface had gone to sleep. Just noticed right when I was about to start. So hopefully you can hear me okay. Bullet Catcher says they gotta stop planning meetings around this time. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing should interfere with any of my streams, but this one in particular should be verboten to miss. And sorry, Ian, that you can't make it. Thanks for chiming in. Catch up when you can. All right. I'm not wasting any time. Last night, so I did a stream last night. I guess I'll just mention apologies for the internet issues. I don't know how I had internet issues. I'm literally in a house by myself. I was the only one online. I wasn't streaming things on various devices just because. And yet I had internet issues, caused some lag. But I think we did some really good stuff. I did also record. I'll see how my recording came out because I've gotten in the habit of recording things locally as well. I don't know if I'll just publish the whole stream. That's probably counterintuitive or just not super efficient use of time. However, I might chop some things out. But we did do some nice stuff that I'm gonna try to do more with. We created 2 different kinds of minotaurs, basically a warrior minotaur and a cleric minotaur, which I call a mazer. Just made it up on the spot. Also, we made a giant toad character class. These are all character classes, kind of if we were playing BX, old school OSR. So we did 2 different minotaurs, a giant toad, and a pixie. Pixie one was tough. That one I feel like needs the most tweaking. That invisibility perk that the pixie monster version of pixie gets is pretty crazy as a player. To get that as a player character, it's kind of a lot. It's basically have greater invisibility on at will anytime you want, all the time. So it's tough. But I also was thinking about either scaling it back in terms of when you get it, or maybe I would have to go back to folklore and see, well, what kind of pixie are we talking about, and maybe hone in on that and see if there's one. I'm not sure if invisibility is something that all pixies get, or if it's just a particular kind of pixie. So that might have to play around with it. But it was a good exercise. Hey, Perkins, happy Friday to you as well. But enough about that. We're on my RPG Roundup multi-Reddit. Links are in the show description, other places if you want to grab it and look at it as we go along. I've switched to the new tab, so I want to make sure I'm getting the kind of newest, funnest, most interesting, or just kind of new stuff. Because I found with the hot tab, you can with regular Reddits, I think the hot tab works well, but with the multi-Reddit, I find that you end up getting, probably because of how it aggregates it, you get stuff from, all of a sudden I'm reading 2-month-old Reddit threads. So let's see what we've got here. And I'm still tuning this list. I may pare it down. The other problem with multi-Reddits is that it's obviously going to favor these subreddits that have the most traffic. So you might find that, say, DM Academy, which gets a lot of traffic, has a lot of posts in it, gets highlighted in this a lot. Now, I like a lot of stuff that comes out of DM's Academy, but I could spend this whole day and just find DM's Academy stuff. So I try to balance it out a little bit. I mean, I still like to get stuff from the OSR subreddit. The whole idea was I wanted to kind of broaden out a bit, stuff that maybe didn't apply so much just to OSR. Because I know there are folks that are in here that are not just OSR full-time GMs and players, but they're actually playing 5th edition or something else. So I wanted to open it up. But it does mean that when in this subreddit, some stuff can kind of get hidden. We shall see. This one might be fun to look at. I'm going to open it in a new tab. This is from, I didn't realize this, but I guess something going on at the RPG Generators subreddit, which is a good subreddit. I think I've gone through. They have these. I went through a few of these in another stream. I don't know if it was last month, maybe the month before. They had a whole bunch of tools. They just listed out. So it's great to have, be able to go through all those tools. Looks like they're doing something similar here in, I guess, for November, 30 days of visual generators. So we'll look at this one. This is a symbol generator. Let me post this in the chat. We're at eggradients.com. let's see, let me just pop this on screen real quick so you can see it. So you can go to eggradients.com/tool/random-symbols-generator. Perkins says they like keeping OSC custom mechanics simple without quote-unquote skills, so they would do monster classes with status checks. What's Perkins? What would you consider? What's a status check? What is that referring to? All right, so here, while I'm waiting for Perkins to respond to that, let's generate some symbols. Wait, did I generate something, or did I not generate something? Lots of ads on here. Do you need symbols beyond what the keyboard can do? Then the random symbol generator is just for you. Find 1,000 symbols plus randomly. All right, well, I'm pressing this. Oh, I see these. I'm looking at it because it's so small. Oh my gosh. There's enough ads in here to choke a cat. Okay. Well, it seems like they definitely, I mean, clearly some of these are hieroglyphics. And some are, all right, I don't know. I'm not sure what I was expecting. This is fine. That's fine. I would almost rather just give me a hieroglyphic generator. Oh, Perkins says that was autocorrect. It's stat checks like in WizCon to do something innate like invisibility. I see. I gotcha. The thing is, Perkins, so I guess there are a couple ways to look at it, right? So you could, if we're talking about for a minute, just jumping off of this symbol generator is okay, but I'm actually more interested in what Perkins is talking about. So we're talking about translating monster abilities into PC abilities. So for instance, with the Pixie, here we run into the thing that I think comes up a lot, that, the monsters, you have to look at them differently than player characters in the meta thought process, because you can say for a Pixie, oh yeah, they're invisible all the time, because you don't have to deal with a Pixie all the time. The Pixie is going to come in for an encounter, a wandering monster, in a room, whatever happens, and then it leaves the scene. However it works out. It doesn't even have to be through combat. It comes in, something happens with the party, it leaves the scene. As the GM, we don't worry about, now that invisible Pixie's off doing its thing, we're not concerned with how it affects the rest of the universe. It just flies off back into the ether until summoned again on some kind of other check or something like that, right? We don't have to deal with it. With a player character, we have to deal with it. And even though old school does not have the same sort of balance that, say, 5th edition does, there are balancing mechanisms. Things like, your amount of experience points per level being a big one. But then we can also have, when do these abilities unlock? There aren't that many player character classes. So in terms of what we see for monster or non-human player character classes, is everything just unlocks at first level. Elves get all their elfy stuff first level, dwarves, halflings, same thing. And so we just bump up their experience point requirements accordingly to account for that. But their powers, their abilities are fairly low level. They're fairly well grounded. What do you do now when you have something like a Pixie that has a really powerful innate ability? It's not even in terms of how it's presented as like casting a spell. It is literally, I can just become invisible at will. And oh, by the way, this is the kind of visibility that doesn't even turn off if I attack or do some mischief. It doesn't turn off. Like, it literally only turns off if I ask if I want to turn it off, and then I can flip it right back on. Super powerful. So how do you translate that to a player character, which you're dealing with all the time? And do you want a first level character who can just be invisibility all the time, regardless of any kind of circumstances, just working? That's hard, especially compared to the other player characters that don't get anything nearly that strong. The other thing is, it's not even something like it's strong, say, in a cleric would turn undead, which is strong, but it's very situational. You have to be facing undead, then you can use that. If something's not undead, turn undead is useless. If you're in the woods, then an elf finds secret doors, not really applicable, right? So all these things are kind of situational, whereas the Pixie's ability is both high level. If you look at the spells that would take to match up what this Pixie can do, it's high level and it's universal. There is no circumstance in which being able to turn invisible at will and stay invisible regardless of what you do isn't going to be really effective and strong. So how do you deal with that? So it seems like Perkins' idea is to have some kind of roll against a statistic. Perkins, you can correct me if I'm misunderstanding. Maybe you have some kind of check, roll under your wisdom to go invisible, do something like that. This is lukewarm coffee for the working man, which could be one way to do it. The one thing I want to be careful with, I mentioned this during the stream, is I really want the player to feel like they're the creature, that they're not some ersatz version, that they're not some dumbed down, minimized version, which I think what happens with 5th edition when they've done this, because everything has to be locked into everything you get with your creature. If you're a creature class, a creature other than human, right? It's kind of like a level 0 thing. And you can't, they've determined, hey, no negative modifiers. So you can't balance in terms of, hey, you're getting this much to strength. So you take away this much from something else. Nope, you're not doing that. But it can't be super strong to counteract, to really be representative of what you're doing. So I can't imagine. I don't know if there's a pixie species in 5th edition that you could play as, but I imagine they're not getting anything like invisibility. Maybe they might get some little invisibility once per day. I don't know. They're not getting it. So you're, as a player, if I'm playing a pixie in say that kind of game, I don't really feel like I'm playing a pixie, because I look at the pixies who are monsters and they're really different than I am. So I don't want any mechanic I put in. I still want the players. It has to be, to me anyway, it has to be as close as I can get to giving them the monster experience at some stage. Now, part of the thing about creating these level templates, these creature as class type of level progressions, is that it doesn't have to be at level 1. You don't have to be a full-fledged pixie with everything a pixie can do at level 1, but at some stage you get there. So you keep along when doing a pixie, and I think I had it by the time you did 10 levels. At level 10, you were essentially a full-fledged pixie, same thing as you are in the monster manual, but you're level 10 now. And then you could probably look at it and think, okay, level 10, what does that compare to, say, what a wizard can do, or what a fighter can do, whatever. They're taking into account maybe kind of items and other things, right? So that's why I want to balance it. So I don't want to make something that, or I want to hew closest to that, as close as I get to that. There might be some that come out of the woodwork, and you're like, if I give the player this, like, I don't know what to do. So either I have to wait until a certain level to give it to them, or maybe I have to tone it down, or change it up, do something, right? So that's kind of where I fall. So I don't know. Rolling under stat, I think, works. It might lead to more min-maxy kind of behavior where it's like, well, I'm going to get an 18 in strength so that I barely ever, or, whatever stat is, so I'm going to rolling under, which is, it's fine. That's how you're setting up. I mean, if you're going to set up a system in which your innate abilities are triggered off of your attribute rolls, then you're inviting the player to maximize their chances by doing that. That's still, there's, say if they have 18 and you're rolling a d20, that still gives them 10% chance of failing, which is something. It's just, it's different. But I do want, at some stage, the player to feel like I did it. I am now a full-fledged pixie or dragon or balrog or giant toad. Like, I am me and the monster. We are one, kind of thing. So that's kind of where I lean when I'm going through. That's maybe my driving thought process of, at some point when they've gone through so many levels, they are exactly where they would be if they were the monster. But that's me. It doesn't have to be everybody's. Windows, why do you have to pop stuff up on me? Perkins says you might introduce other limitations, like if they're touching iron or steel, they can't go invisible. Also mentions that my level-based limitations would work too, possibly following spell progression. Yeah, you could do that for some stuff. The big decisions you have is, when did they get this ability and how does it scale? So the way my thing was last night when I was doing it, and I guess I have it here still, we can look at it. Since we're talking about it, might as well look at it. I just happen to keep it here. So here's my level progression that I gave them. So I gave them the invisibility from jump because my presumption was that this is a main characteristic of pixies. As I noted afterwards, this might not actually be what people think of with pixies. So I would be fine to go in and mess around with this stuff. If I was reading up and maybe the player who comes to me and says, I want a pixie character, and I say, okay, what does a pixie kind of mean to you? What's the mythological background? What is your source for pixieage? And I go, when I read it, it doesn't have anything to do with invisibility, I'll can it, right? You're a different sort of pixie, different thing. But the things I thought were like, these are kind of your pixie main things, is you get flying, some kind of visibility, and then a low armor class. Because remember, in BX, you don't have different size groupings that have different mechanical interactions with each other. So there's no sense of I'm tiny versus medium, so do something else. I tend to house rule those in because I think they're very useful, but out of the box, we don't have it. So just dealing with out of the box, I said, okay, you're going to get that low AC, which is crazy. I mean, that's like you have almost full plate on from, and you're not wearing anything. But I would also say, I think I said something, yeah, can't wear armor. You could probably add in something like, yeah, can't use iron or steel. That would be totally fine. And it works with a lot of fairy lore, the elf lore, so that works great. So I gave you, so I get lesser invisibility. So you can be invisible, but it's just your normal visibility where you're invisible, but you do something, it pops you out. And you could fly, but you have to fly. The way they actually have pixie flight in the monster description is you can fly for 3 rounds and then rest. You have to rest 1 round. So I flip it around for at low levels. You can fly 1 round, then you got to rest 3 rounds. Then, hey, you gain surprise. Instead of just auto surprise, you gain surprise on a 1 and 2. And then all these things, your flight amps up, your invisibility amps up, and everything kind of amps up until by 10th level, you have everything. But I could change this around. I could start with, well, maybe I say AC 6, and then I go down that way because you're just getting better. Because part of this, I think, with this AC thing is you're nimble, you're small, you're zipping around. But maybe I could say, well, when you're inexperienced, you're sluggish still. You're not that great. So while you're still harder to hit because you're tiny, that's going to scale. So I could scale these things out. This is still, even if it was only what you get at level 1, this would be pretty darn strong. But you're a pixie, So I want you to feel, I guess that's kind of the things. I want you to feel you're a pixie, right? But I could definitely see, I think if I guess what I would say is I could spend hours and just reorganizing these things, moving numbers up and down, and there probably wouldn't be one that I might feel. You'd probably have to put me on some kind of timer. So I could probably sit there and do it forever, leave, and then come back and then spend another few hours dithering around on it. I think the big things are, okay, figure out what you like, and then like we didn't get to last night because I wanted to go through multiple monsters as opposed to doing things like doing the actual experience levels, because I think that's where you're going to get a lot of experimentation, actual in-game stuff. Like, here's where I think you're going to fall, see where you start to line up with the players, where they are, and then fiddle with it to get to the right spot where you want to be. But I can tell you this, the experience levels for the pixie are going to be quite high because you're getting, even with lesser invisibility, it's at will. Maybe you could have something like, I don't know, you could probably put some timer on it maybe at this point, but you're casting this one spell at will pretty much all the time. So you're going to have it's going to be a high experience point value. And then we didn't even get to look at other monster classes where you might say, and there's something that's like a 30 hit die monster, which means that your level progression is going to be at least 30 levels. Everyone else is done on their 5th character. You're still trugging along, but at the end of the day, you're going to be a dragon, a Balrog, whatever else. Perkins says the strength of a pixie may be quite low. Yeah, you can have that. I mean, I did their constitution being kind of low. You can play around with the attribute modifiers. I don't know that you're going to get them to a degree to really offset the level progression stuff, at least my version. You're still going to have a pretty strong first level character, even if I were to say strength -4, constitution -4. The fact that you are invisible, have a really low AC, when you're going to have the lowest AC in the party for probably, unless someone gets, they roll really well on their coinage and they can afford full plate off the bat. You're going to have the lowest AC in the party, probably for at least a level or two. And then only the fighters, if you have one, or the fighter type is going to get to your level. So, there's a lot of advantages. Perkins says 1d6 for strength. That'd be another thing to do, is take away dice. I wouldn't mind that. Like, hey, roll 4d6, you guys roll 3d6, you guys roll 2d6. I think some game, I don't know if it was Ardent Grimoire. Maybe Ardent Grimoire had that. Somewhere else I saw that, where they actually just changed the amount of dice you roll. Though I'd say it's out of fashion. Certainly in the modern game and in 5th edition, it's out of fashion to have kind of negative modifiers. That's where, again, I would love to have just tiny, small, medium, because then you could really just set it that, hey, if you're tiny, even if you have 18 strength, if you're dealing with something that's medium sized or larger than that, like your strength is just getting, like, it's like adding a big negative modifier. Whereas if you're huge, and you have a 6 strength, it's all relative. Basically, that your strength would be relative to your creature size. And then you wouldn't have to worry about all this minus this plus this. It's like, no, you're fine. And then if you're medium and you're fighting something tiny and you hit it, it's like you're doing extra damage because you're just, even if you're not strong for a medium-sized person, you're fighting a tiny thing. You don't have to be strong to squish an ant. It's just, my daughter can do it. Squished. A baby can do it by accident. Squished, even though, baby's got, 2 strength. So, all right. Well, I'll give this an upvote. Didn't quite dig that symbol generator, but what are you gonna do? They ain't all gems. Let's see what other stuff we have. And as usual, call out if you see something that I skip over, but you think it's worth seeing. Do people like these? I see these around a lot. These world building prompts or these world building topics. Ask me about my world, and they'll fill in. Do people like those? I'm kind of torn. I sort of interested in them. I'm sort of feel like, I don't know. I guess it's nice for the person's world building because it's basically you're asking the community for prompts. Who's the greatest, wizard of them all in your world? And so that forces you to think about, well, who is the greatest wizard in my world? But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of implying that people have interest in your world, which I don't. But that's, I'm not trying to be cruel. I barely have interest in my own world, let alone somebody else's. Beginner-friendly RPGs. I need an idea for a pet show, but with dragons. No thanks. No shame to this person. I'll give an upvote, but not my bag. Recommendations for a starting adventure for GM and PCs. This is an OSR one. I'm curious on the comments on this one because I'm always looking for stuff. So this is posted by Natariu. They picked up OSE Basic and they want to run it for a group who's very open to play OSR, which is great. They've played a lot of Call of Cthulhu and they want to switch it up a bit. They want, what adventure modules would we recommend starting with for a GM with little OSR experience? They have read the quick primer for OSR and also for new OSR players. Many people have recommended to keep on the Borderlands, but it doesn't seem new GM friendly to me. Well, there's always Tomb of the Serpent Kings. It's probably the king of new GM friendly because it's walking you through. That would be I would start with. I don't know that it's the best adventure of all time. But what it does have that just about every other adventure lacks is guidance. The other one, Into the Unknown, is also like that, an old school module that was designed to give some guidance to the process and not just throw you in. Keep on the Borderlands. I mean, I love Keep on the Borderlands. I would agree it's probably not so super new GM friendly, despite the fact that it came in the basic box, just because it's throwing you a lot of stuff and not a lot of structure. I feel like as a new GM, you could use some more structures in there. Though I think what you could do is Keep on the Borderlands and then read up on the tons of wisdom that's online about it, which I'm sure includes some ways to add some extra structure that you might not be thinking about, whether it's literally a quest or adding some more intrigue into the keep area that leads to the caves. I mean, they already hint, the evil cleric is there, but they don't really, in the module, it's just kind of like, ooh, this evil cleric is there in hiding, I think, or undercover, but you don't really get a sense of what to do with it. It's just like, here it is. You come up with everything else yourself, but there's a lot of structure I think you could find from things online. Those would be my picks. Ryan Smith says, when a baby grabs hold of your beard, I'd swear they have 18 strength temporarily. Yes. Yes, indeed. Perkins says that reading the old modules is instructive. They show a different approach to the game. Oh, yes, they do for sure. Von Economo suggests Winter's Daughter, Incandescent Grottos, and Hole in the Oak. So I've looked at Winter's Daughter. I've looked at Hole in the Oak. I have not looked at Incandescent Grottos. I think I might have a humble bundle. I might have gotten that. I have to check. And some other people, I'll just upvote these. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I think I know Fred's BX game. I believe that's our own friend of the channel, Frederick. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Figures he would have a list a mile long. All good stuff. It's hard to put myself in that mindset of a brand new GM, but I really did like that about Tomb of the Serpent King, and I wish more modules would do that. Just give some guidance, especially if you're doing a low level module. Don't just think of the characters who are low level, the player characters. Think of if this is a low level game, then maybe this is a new GM, so maybe they could use some hints. Even experienced GMs, if you've been play testing this thing, if you have experience with it, put that experience into the book. Tell me what you did when you ran through here. What issue did you come up with? Or what came up? How did you solve it? What kind of things did your players do? Something to look out for. Hey, we have this great element in the dungeon, but just be aware your players may try to interact with it this way, this way, and this way. Here's what my players did. Here's how it worked out or didn't work out. So I recommend this, that, or the other. Or this is a reason why this thing is like this, because this happened in my game. If you want to open it up a bit because it has more possibilities, but it's a little more fraught, then do that. Like, I would love more of these books to have some more kind of conversational stuff of here's my practical things from actually running it, right? Because in many ways, a module is like this this is the best case scenario, right? Everything goes according to Hoyle. Here's how it's all going to play out. But of course, nothing goes according to Hoyle all the time. So having that advice in there, having somebody saying, yes, because I've run this 50 times as I was developing it, here's all the things that I found. Here are even changes that I made. The reason why it's this way in the book, it's not this way, it's because I did this. But if you want to do this other one, which is also interesting, you could try this. Like, I just would love almost like an annotated version of the book. Perkins says they love reading and hearing DM advice. They read and reread examples of D&D gameplay. Yeah, I love to read those the kind of campaign diaries and here's what I did. I mean, they're just wonderful because it's reading these different experiences. People do things you don't think about and just whatever. It also gives you, again, that practical advice. Someone saying, look, when I ran through this, here's what happened to me. You can do. And yeah, they help you kind of almost solve some of your problems, or at least get a grip on what some of the issues might be before you get to them. Let's see. Oh, Brian Smith has a question. What kind of regularly created content would I find most valuable? They're looking into offering some very cheap monthly random tables, artwork, tokens, etc. Well, I'll put your question. Let me put your question. I'll pop it on the stream, Brian Smith. Here's Brian Smith's thing. So what kind of regularly created content would we find most valuable if someone, aka Brian Smith, was looking to offer some very cheap monthly random tables / artwork / tokens? So there's a couple things. So obviously, Brian Smith, you've been here long enough. You've been around the block with me enough to know that I probably don't need any tokens. Not to say they're not useful for a bunch of people. Don't need them. I think the thing that you have to compete with is the fact that there's just oodles of free stuff. So you're going to have to think about, well, what am I bringing to the table that they're not? Now, part of it's just that, hey, people are going to want to, if you're putting out stuff that's great, people are going to want to support you. Like, people support me, and and I've done a terrible job of highlighting the people that do support me and giving them returns on their investments. But people support because, hey, they want to help you out, help you do what you're doing because you're doing great stuff. Beyond that, you have to think about, well, what is going to be setting my things apart from somebody else's free things? Especially in the OSR space, where there is so much just wonderful and thoughtful and interesting content that's just thrown on blogs, thrown up in Perchance or somewhere else. So you want to think about, well, what can I offer them that they're not already getting? I think that you can find some niches. I think there's probably some niches still in kind of like the one page or really short sort of adventure, kind of pamphlet adventures, or maybe not even adventures, but here's a location with some stuff going on, but give kind of the full package. Like, I could see, I mean, something I want to do myself is, hey, here's a couple of hexes. Here's some things inside the hexes. Here's the tables that go along with these hexes. Here's maybe the location that goes along with these hexes, and kind of have everything. So it's like a little piece you could drop in your game and kind of go and kind of have have at least a lot of it. Maybe they wouldn't be like, here's a mega dungeon, because that's a whole book, but here's the chapel, and here's a little map of the chapel, and here's what's going on in the chapel, and here's how it could relate outside, something like that. In terms of tables and things, I think they're great. I would almost look at something, I think, to me, which is not thought about enough, given the tools that we have, are the automations, right? Yes, I can roll out on a table, but what I loved about that, Abulafia or whatever, I forget that site that had all those automated tables. I think Perchance does this too, is instead of saying I got to roll all these tables, I can have something generate for me. I mean, kind of like that symbol generator, but on a better thing, maybe, or have some kind of integrations with a VTT, or I can have it on a macro or a Discord bot, or I can sit there and say, hey, bot, give me a random encounter and do that. Like those time and space saving things that I could have, because I think that oftentimes we have all this tech and we don't use it. We still see blog posts where they're just giving me the D1000 table and it's all written in text, and that's fine. And I'd like to see the reference table, but give me a button so I can bookmark this and come back and hit the button. Give me the button, right? Where's the like Wataboo for text generating stuff? I mean, there probably is some out there, but that's kind of what that would probably be where I would go. I mean, more maps are always good for me, not battle maps, but things like location maps and things like that, I think are always fine, especially if you can find a style that works for you and doesn't get lost. Because, Dyson Logos kind of his style locked down, and some other folks who do that kind of similar style, it's kind of hard to tell the difference. I feel like if you have a unique style or a unique take on locations or something interesting about them, I always kind of wish with those that they did give you a little bit more context than they do, instead of just like, here's a map and I'm going to give it a nice name, but then nothing beyond it. Maybe give me a story. Give me a story about this map. If you're going to give me the abandoned dwarven mine, then okay, you could give me the abandoned dwarven mine of the chief Murgradrill. Okay, but you could give me the story. Ooh, what's the history of this tribe? What drove them out? Like, give me some give me some stuff. Give me some stuff. Because sometimes I need the inspiration for the stuff as well as the map, and not just the map. Let's see. Perkins says they created a bunch of automatic random tables for Fantasy Grounds, but the content was basically all Judges Guild IP. Well, I don't know if you have to worry about Judges Guild IP. I mean, obviously they could still sue you, but it's they're kind of. Is anybody? Because I know they've been kicked off of every major platform. Maybe they're available somewhere, but you could probably. I mean, so much stuff is just tweaked enough kind of content, I should say. Yeah, the stuff, the Fantasy Grounds, and that would be nice if the VTT makers got together and came up with some kind of standard format. I mean, it'd be impossible, but I could see, if they had something like to use like programming, like have some kind of JSON data stream that could just work. You format your stuff in this JSON, you could plug it into Foundry, you could plug it into Fantasy Grounds, you could plug it into Roll20, and they would all they would all be handled differently and on the back ends of those systems, but what you're inputting could all be in the same format. I mean, that's a pipe dream, but I could try. All right, here's one that seems interesting. It's got a lot of upvotes, so that's got to be something. A sociopath's guide to railroading your players. So remember, this is DM Academy, which I think has a lot of great stuff, offering advice, giving advice, but is very 5th edition centric. If they don't mention that they're playing a different game, we just keep in mind that it's coming from a 5th edition perspective. So as we're reading through this and responding to it, just realize that's where it's coming from, not OSR, not Call of Cthulhu, not anything else. If they don't say it, it's 5th edition. This is posted by far_line 8468. Yeah, we all know that a story should be emergent and that you need to preserve player agency. But sometimes you just really, really want your players to do something. I'm here to tell you a few tricks on how to make your players think that the railroad you put them on was totally their idea. First off, funnel method. Don't have all roads lead to the same point, because this will always come off as unnatural. Instead, have 2/3 of your secondary scenarios that eventually all naturally funnel into your intended outcome. When the players make a decision, choose the best of those 3 to push them into. As long as you keep those secondary scenarios fairly diverse, you shouldn't have trouble getting your pesky players back on track. Number 2, keep the railroad as hidden as possible so your players think they put themselves on it. If, for example, you encounter your encounters planned in the sewers, wait a minute. If, for example, you planned encounters in the sewers as your players try to sneak into the castle, be wary about having an NPC mention it in a rumor. This is so when your players start to climb in through the sides and then disguise themselves as a guard, you could have another guard casually tell the players about the secret entrance they're supposed to be guarding. And then, wouldn't you know it, your players are in the sewers as planned. If you told them about it beforehand, though, they'll feel like their disguise plan was pointless. Okay, I'm not sure. I think I see what they're saying. that I don't think if you're sneaking into the castle, having your disguise is pointless once you get in the castle, but I think that just might be their example as opposed to the gist of what they're saying. And then third, master the art of feigning surprise. One of my favorite faces I put on for my players is the flustered DM. When they start their plan, that totally isn't your plan, pause for a moment, then say in a concerned fashion, okay. Then pretend like you're somewhat struggling to officiate what just happened. As the action picks up, talk faster and faster to create a fake sense of panic as if both you and your players are at the edge of your seat. And then finally, inspiration dice. This works every time. I don't know. It sounds a little bit like, what was that, Sex Panther? 70% of the time, it works every time. After your players do the thing you totally didn't plan for them to do, say out loud, who came up with such and such? Then hand them an inspiration die. Okay, well, that's not actually solving the railroad, but it is something you should do. Let's see. Brian Smith, I think this is still going back to his, what should I do? What should I do if I want to make stuff? Says that I find the stuff that I enjoy is pretty simple, one-page dungeon type things that are easy enough to drop in and evocative. I usually will pay a couple bucks for a cool idea. Yep, I agree. People really love the trilemma kind of one-page dungeon, and I think there's still room for other people. I don't think they have some kind of stranglehold on the one-page dungeon or pamphlet dungeon. You know, people love those pamphlet dungeons. Print them on two sides of a page, do all kinds of funky folding, and there you go. I think Itch is chock full of them. I suppose that might actually be counterproductive if you want to enter that niche to say that it's chock full of them. But I think those are always handy. It's always handy to be able to have something you can do fast, especially if you can do it in a format that makes it easy to play as a functional document, which is why I have a problem sometimes with the one-page dungeon stuff. Is there because it's the shtick is one-page dungeon. They're cramming all the stuff in there, and then you got on one page, but now it's kind of a mess. And I would rather it be, hey, this is the 2-page dungeon or 3-page dungeon that has everything I need and I can actually use it, as opposed to, ooh, this is great, but as soon as I try to play with it, everything I got to go to other books or I got to do something else because they've sacrificed so much for this thing that in the age of so much things being digital, who cares if it's 1 page or 2 pages? I'm sure there are people who are still printing them out. More power to you. Sorry for the ink usage, but as someone who might only be using it in a digital platform, the fact that it's 1 page versus 3 pages, I don't care. Just sacrifice your design, that kind of fixed design principle for something that's more practically useful to me. Perkins says their railroad is more subtle. Players go, right, I just put the cool stuff there. Yeah, I mean, I don't tend to do that. But then I do get those conversations with my players like, well, we didn't find that much stuff in the last foray. And I'm like, yeah, because you went right and stuff might have been left. You don't know. To me, that just brings them back to if we're playing in a sense where they're coming back to places potentially to explore, then I go, well, that gives you a reason to go back. Yeah, you went right and you found this stuff. There were places you could have gone left. There were doors you didn't open. Maybe stuff is over there. But, I like to build stuff that has that kind of, maybe you want to go back and check that out again kind of stuff. If you're on a more narrative linear thing where you don't think they're ever going to come back, then sure, you probably don't want to have half the stuff that's to be found there off thing. But it's kind of getting in kind of I guess the philosophical areas. Talking about 1-page dungeons, Brian Smith says, yeah, the 1 page is kind of a self-imposed constraint to spur terse design, but maybe not useful for every project. Well, I think that's the thing, right? It's that the terseness. And yeah, as some kind of challenge from a designer, being terse is good. But what so many people forget or lose track of is that your document isn't there to be a document. It's there to be an aid in play. So if your terseness of design gives you this wonderful designed piece, but that wonderful design doesn't translate to actually being practically useful, then that's a poor choice that you've made. Because at the end of the day, these are aids to play a game. They're not art pieces. And I think that often gets lost. People go for this art piece route and but then you actually go to play it. And it's not even just the creators. I mean, it's kind of Maze of the Blue Medusa phenomenon. People just fell in love with the art and the design and maybe the overarching thing. And then it was only later when people were like, hey, wait a minute, I actually tried to play this thing and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The style that everybody loves made it really hard to find stuff. Like all these issues came out because so many people were just going gaga over the design stuff and forgot or neglected or overlooked the fact that you're supposed to be playing a game with this. It's not like a coffee table book. Here, look at this Maze of the Blue Medusa. No, you got to play with it. And so I'm thinking, or what I want is something I can play with. And if it's not as pretty as something else, that's fine, because ultimately it's here for me to play with and not to look at and go, oh, which pretty art, and look at that font they chose. Okay. So these things, as far as railroading, they're fine. I mean, look, if you have to get your party somewhere, then I think funneling them towards there is good. So here's what I would say. If you're going to be funneling your parties towards something, it should be something that's very important. And then the more important it is, the less it's going to feel like they're being funneled. You expect in a Lord of the Rings scenario, everything is converging on this conflict, Sauron versus the free peoples of the West. So if things are funneling you into that conflict, you're not going to think of it so much as this is something the GM is doing to us. But the fact is that this is a world-setting event. Everything is in motion. Everything is converging. All lines are converging on this particular conflict. We get it. We may not want to deal with Sauron. We decide as players, we're not leaving the Shire. Then stuff comes to get us, right? Because we're in this conflict, and this is coming. There's nowhere that you can really be free of it because everything is converging. We get it. The more local, the smaller the thing is, then the more evident it's going to be, like, oh, there's an ogre over there, and everything you're doing is leading to the ogre. It's like, why? This is not a nexus of space and time in the universe. It's just an ogre. So if you're doing some kind of, which a lot of people do, these really high campaigns where the high threat, high tension, high stakes campaigns where the world is at stake, then it makes sense that things are going to be funneling towards it because all the forces in the universe are converging. And that's going to include the stuff that, everybody's doing. So that convergence is going to happen. If it's just like, yeah, there's a troll under the bridge and all of a sudden all roads lead to that troll's bridge, it's going to feel more suspect. So the grander your campaign, then the more that I think it's acceptable to everybody that there's certain funneling, because we're going to put it in the context of that conflict or that big, huge world event. Bullet Catcher's back from their meeting. Welcome back, Bullet Catcher. Now, as far as keep the railroad as hidden as possible, I mean, of course, you always want, if you're planning something, the players to feel like it was their idea, whether it was your idea or not. The thing is with the sewer bit, I don't know. He's saying that I think there are some ways you can be slick about. Sometimes players just don't want to do what they feel like you're feeding them to do. There is a little bit of, I'm going to go against the grain here. Everyone's telling us to take the sewers. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't know why I don't like it, but I don't like it. So I think there is some wisdom in toning back the amount of your NPCs you're going to be pushing. Like, oh, they're in the street. Shopkeeper says, go through the sewers. You go into the tavern. The barmaid slips you an ale or a mead. And underneath there is a piece of paper, and the paper says, go to the sewers. And you go upstairs to sleep, and there's rose petals that have been put on your bed, and it spells out, go to the sewers. And it's going to you get heavy-handed. It's going to feel like, okay, the DM's telling us to go to the sewers. They're going to feel it. So I think there's some wisdom in maybe being very light with that. You want them to go through the sewers. Maybe be really careful about how this information comes up. I think certainly let the party make the inquiries. So here's a situation, right? So you can have some NPC come up and say, take the sewers to break into the thing. And the party's like, oh, I don't know about that. Smells like a trap. But if they go to the guy and ask, hey, any ways in here? And there's somebody who would know, and they pull out some kind of map, and they say, like, well, look, I just happen to have a scroll that's got the original plans. There's a sewer that happens to run through here. I don't know what happens to it, but I know it runs through, and I know it comes out the other side. Then the party's going to think, ooh, like, that's interesting. Maybe even have them, and this is where maybe having them roll for it. Here you're breaking a rule, you're gating information, but the fact that you made them roll for it, and then you can do a little bit of acting without having them think about it a little bit, so it doesn't seem like it's just totally a pat answer. That might help. But you can also easily outslick yourself. This is where you can be too smart for your own good. So you're sitting there, you're trying to figure out how subtle. Oh, I'm going to be so subtle. I'm going to weave this in there. They're going to think it's their own idea, and they just don't get it, which happens a lot. Like, I want them to go to the sewers, so I'm just going to put all these things about sewers, and I'm not going to actually say the sewers, and they're going to get it right, and then they don't. So you got to be careful. Got to be careful. The feigning surprise stuff, yeah, I guess that's fine. I mean, if you're a good actor, oh, you're going to do this thing. Oh, I never would have thought of that. That's cool. I try to actually just play it pretty low key, whether they've surprised me or haven't surprised me, but that's me. I do like what they're saying about inspiration dice. Yes. If you don't plan for them to do it, throw them a bone. Throw them a bone. Brian Smith says, perhaps just have conflicting advice. Go to the sewers, and somebody else is like, definitely don't go in the sewers. That might kind of hint that they know that the sewers are important somehow, but they can't find out unless they check it out. That's true, though. You could also have that, again, that's where you can out-slick yourself, where they trust one source more than another, and then one of them is saying, don't go. And they're like, oh, yeah, that guy, he's on the money. Don't go. This other guy is a little bit too, he wants us to go. Why does he want us to go, right? So you can just play around with it, play around with different things. Part of it's going to be coming down to knowing your players, knowing how they like to figure things out, knowing what things, because that's what you're going to find out is, oh, my players are really, they really will trust NPCs who tell them stuff. Then great, do that. Or my players, they don't. So I got to figure out some other way. My players, if they don't discover it themselves, they don't trust it, kind of thing. So, that's a big part of it. Is just, you got to figure out where your party is on those things. Because that's really going to, and of course it doesn't make for great advice, right? Oh, you can do this or you do that. You do this, you can do that. And but I mean, that's really the big, I kind of feel like that's the big thing with GMing. I mean, granted, there's these kind of universal or pseudo-universal rules, but there's always that your miles may vary kind of thing. And where that is always varying is pretty much if it's not a particular GM's habits and how they like to work and what stuff works for them, it's got to know your party, know your players at the table. Once you know them, you'll be able to figure out what appeals to them, what's not, and it'll be a lot easier. It's hard to, every piece of advice is going to fall flat with the wrong table, basically. There's just no way around it. Brian Smith says, yeah, the point was to railroad, which they don't do. Yeah. I don't tend to do that either. I always tell my players, hey, you go where you want to. I'll figure it out. Okay, I don't want to do party composition. I really, there are some kind of posts I just don't care about, just topics. I see them and I'm just like, scroll on. I can tell you for myself, I don't care. I don't care about this is the best. Here are the best subclasses or whatever. I don't care. Here's party composition. I don't care. It's just, I don't care. And I'm someone who's like, look, you guys all want to be bards. You guys all want to be whatever. Do it. But I think I mean, I put it in this video. You check the video that I pushed up maybe an hour. This one almost 2 hours ago. It's pretty much my thing. It's like, I'm not highlighting you. And part of that is like, it's up to you guys to do. And, like, I'm not changing the world because you guys decide to play all bards. You got to figure it out. That's the fun. I feel like there's something that's lost a little bit. Maybe it's with the emphasis. There's probably something to the how much we emphasize the storytelling aspect. I think there's a little bit of a losing sight of of not wanting to embrace the kind of gamey stuff. And what I mean by that is there's some things that's just a challenge that you can look at and say, this is your challenge. So if my players came to me and said, we want to play as two, I mean, look, my players right now, there are two of them, and they don't have any healers. They kind of don't have any super, none of them are like full fighters, and for me, if they were asking me like, well, we're not sure what to do, I was like, this is the challenge. Like, you guys are signing up for a challenge. Take it like that. Look at it like you're playing a video game and you could play on easy mode or you could play on medium or hard. Your party makeup is going to go a ways towards establishing somewhat where you're going to be, because a balanced party with access to a bunch of stuff is going to have an easier time relative to one that is not. But instead of looking at it and say, oh, GM, you got to make up the balance, the difference. No, I don't. Oh, you should give us PCs or make healing available. No, I don't. It's you guys are deciding to play on hard mode. Embrace it as a game and say, yeah, we're on hard mode and we're going to kick this thing's butt because we're badass like that. And I don't think people really talk about that. It all gets into the this kind of story time. But I kind of think maybe we should go back to embracing some of that stuff. Hey, you know what? It's a game, and I'm gonna do some, like people would play Skyrim and say, you know what, I know that this kind of combination of stuff is gonna be hard. I'm gonna do it. Or people who play games like you know, like those big Paradox Interactive sort of world games, and they'll take on some like you know, you could play as England or you could play as France. Someone will say like, I'm gonna play as Trinidad and Tobago, or like a really small country that's in the middle of nowhere and it's really difficult, but you do it for the challenge because it's a game, and then when you succeeded against all the odds. Well, that doesn't really come up so much. It seems to come around to, oh, the GM should kind of fix it, or GMs telling each other you should fix it. Like, I know, I'm not fixing it. I'm the Grinch. I'm not fixing it. You fix it. Your problem, not mine. Oh, so we got some stuff going on here in chat. Let's see. Perkins, I think going back to an earlier topic. Oh, Perkins and Brian Smith are having their own discussion. It's all good. Stuff. Read the chat if you're on YouTube or somewhere where you can. Perkins and Brian Smith are having some good discussion about rumors. What do we got here? We're at 53 minutes. So let's see if we can find one. Can we find one good one? How to manage 8 players. Ugh, just don't. Flaws. Here, this might be good. This is needing advice. It got downvoted. Stop downvoting things you just don't like, people. If you don't like it, just pass on. You don't need to go and downvote it. I don't think this person here posing this is breaking some kind of rule. They're just posing something you don't like. So you're like, downvote. Don't downvote it. You don't have to upvote it, but you don't have to downvote it. I think that's just rude. Rude. Be more humane to your fellow DMs. This is posted by Atari Axis. New DM, 2 sessions in, only 1 rescheduled. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but fine. And one of their players, a Dragonborn sorcerer, has the above flaw. What is the above flaw? It's a great flaw, and I think my player's keen to keep it in mind while playing, but how to use it to help them develop. I don't see the flaw. What is the flaw? That's not a great flaw. It's total BS. I don't see the flaw. Am I missing what the flaw is? One of the players has the above flaw. What is the above flaw? What am I missing? What is the flaw? Can someone help me? Flaws, the title of the post. Title of the post is flaws. Don't expect me. Oh, don't expect me to save those who can't save themselves. That's the flaw. I see. I thought that was the, okay. All right. For some reason, I thought that was what the GM's I read that as that's the GM's point of view on this is, hey, don't expect me to save players who can't help themselves. I see. That's the flaw. So they want to, how do I use it to help them develop? I don't see. Here's the thing is you don't need to help your players develop their characters. Let your players develop their characters. They'll develop it as they're playing. Just let them do it. If you want to, you can institute a system, which I think it would be good, which is if a player brings up their own flaw in a way that's meaningful, hand them some experience, I'd like to use like an inspiration kind of meta currency. If you bring up your own flaw in a situation that is makes it harder for you, I'll give you an inspiration you can use later. That's something you can do. But otherwise, let them play their characters. Stop getting in the players' business. Stop. This is like people got mad at GMs, players got mad at GMs back in the day for pushing their alignment on them by telling them, oh, you know what, you're breaking your alignment, you're doing that. Like, people hated that. I think it's one of the many reasons why alignments have sort of fallen out of fashion was the backseat from the GM who's telling you, you're chaotic good and that was a lawful evil act. So, and it's, I don't mind that after the fact, like, hey, you're chaotic good, you slaughtered a whole village for no reason, so you're going to start sliding down that scale. I'm fine with that, but it would get to the point where it would be proactive. I want to slaughter the village. GM telling you cannot slaughter the village because you're chaotic good, and then arguments ensuing kind of thing. But I think that's just, so we don't do that anymore. Or I'm guessing most GMs don't do it anymore because most GMs don't even play with alignment. So that's fallen away. But now we have this kind of thing with these GMs who are doing it for the right reasons, but I just think it's wrong. You don't need to help them develop. If your player comes to you and says, I would like you to help me develop my character, great. But let them be the initiator of that kind of thing. Because my feeling is, if you're putting things in front of them in the world and it's interesting and it gives them points of interaction and it's got all this stuff that they're interacting with, then they're going to show character growth. They have something in mind for their character and it's going to progress. And you can kind of throw things in, folks, things in their backstory, things that that are going to sort of hit the right notes. But you don't have to push them and like, I've got a mini quest so you can use your flaw. Like, stop. Leave them alone. I mean, it really, and the thing is, you're taking on all these responsibilities that just make your job more difficult. You got GMs, you got enough responsibilities as it is without having to babysit your players' flaws and deal with these things. So, at least from my point of view, let your players manage as much of that as they possibly can and just leave it alone. And if they decide that they don't end up using the flaw, it's no big deal. Just let it be. You don't need to build it. You don't need to let them do it. Let them do it themselves. And I think if you keep your doors of communication open, then if there's a problem with it, they can come to you with the problem, and that can then you can work it out at that point. But you don't have to be proactive. Don't be a backseat player driver. Perkins says their favorite character flaw was a compulsive truthfulness. It was a 50-year-old first level wizard. That's cool. The DM was using GURPS to enhance abilities based on flaws. That's kind of cool too. The only problem I have with that is in a wrong group. I think if you just threw that on 5th edition large, like it just end up in that min-max machine of, and then I could take on these flaws and then I can add even more to this and blah, blah, blah. And then of course they get mad. I can't believe my GM is pushing my flaws. Like, well, if you're going to take them, that's why I like to keep everything as in the player realm as I can, which is like, I would rather say, look, if you don't want to play your flaws, you don't have to. But if you do, I'll give you something. As opposed to if you take the flaw, you get this other thing, because it just gives this relation. I don't like that exchange, because I don't want the players to either take the flaw just for the good thing and then be mad if their flaw gets called up. But I would rather that when they engage with the flaw, that activates something. That's how I, at least currently in my brain, that's how I kind of figure it for myself. Bullet Catcher says, being newer to DMing and find myself getting excited on behalf of my players. We have some downtime. Several players have not taken advantage of it. I'm having to concisely tell myself to let it go. Yeah, you got to let it go. I think the thing is, Bullet Catcher, is that if you have some players who are engaging with downtime and getting stuff done, and other players who aren't, over time, I feel like those players are going to be like, hey, wait a minute, why am I not getting as much stuff done? Oh, because I'm not doing anything with my downtime. You could encourage them a little bit. Oh, hey, hey, there's this thing you mentioned you wanted to research. Now's a great time to research it. Like, you can throw out some things, but yes, ultimately, let it go. If they don't take advantage of it, they don't take advantage of it. But you can help kind of make them aware of it a little bit. But yeah, if you're getting into it, like where you feel like you're sort of getting into the point where you're hassling them about it, or doing that, then you want to stop. Okay, I guess that's about it. We're at an hour. We're at an hour. We had some good conversation. I don't know if we actually got much out of the Reddit machine today. I feel like we had some good stuff going on. I don't know if I have anything else going on. I posted that video earlier if you want to take a look at that. I'm going to do some stuff with those monsters we created on last night's stream. Bullcatcher says, good advice. My sandbox just started. Players only now just leaving town to venture forth. Awesome. Yeah, have fun with the sandbox. Remember, just don't plan too much out, because you never know where they're going to turn. But just have fun with it, and just keep yourself flexible so that whatever they do, you can kind of pivot. And don't be afraid to ask them at the end of a session where they want to go the next session. I feel like people get in this mode, or do it like in between sessions. I feel like people get in this mode where, like, if they don't capture it during the game session, then it's like verboten to talk about it until the next game session. But there's no reason not to text your players, use your Discord, use whatever to say, hey, 3 days before the next game session, hey, can you guys set up where you're going so I can be ready for it? I mean, I don't know why I feel like that gets overlooked all the time. Just, you don't need to only talk to your players during game. Email them, text them, however your communication set up, and ask them, where are you going to go? So I can set up, kind of thing. All right, folks. Well, have a great weekend. Hope you found this useful. I know I always have fun. If you feel like giving a thumbs up on your way out, that would be awesome. If you find yourself in here and not subscribed and you feel like subscribing, that would also be awesome. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I will talk to you later.